Tallman.
Good morning. Somebody just said that Rick just called in and said that the House of Representatives said they're not going to defund sanctuary cities. Yes, they will. I think, because it's run by Republicans, and a Republican who doesn't vote for the defunding of sanctuary cities ultimately is going to pay. My opinion. By the way, we've got the Willie Nelson book to give away to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th caller. And this book is called Pretty Paper, a perfect read for the holiday season, celebrating the Christmas spirit. Willie Nelson with David Ritz, a heartwarming holiday tale based on Nelson's classic Christmas song. Do we have the books with us? Okay. They're signed copies. Signed by me. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Wallace. Yeah. That's what I do, Chris. You know, all these people have these books that are coming out, and I'm waiting for the Chris Wallace book. That's what I'm waiting for. But you know what? You were too busy to write a book.
Well, you know, people have been asking me, but you're right. I'm I'm kind of busy covering the news rather than trying to report. Not report on it, but trying to talk about it.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this, though, and this is kind of a fun question, I think. If you were to write a book about this election cycle, what do you think the focus of that book would be?
Well, there's a famous saying in Hollywood that a great screenwriter, William Goldman, said, "Nobody knows anything," and that would probably be the headline of the book, because everybody, with the possible exception of Jamie Allman, was so wrong about this election. We obviously didn't take Trump as seriously as we should have, as early as we should have. I began to, back in October of 2015, after some prompting by you and finally getting a chance to sit down with him. But, you know, the amount of egg on our faces could make the biggest omelet in history.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess, you know, to a certain degree, we've talked about this before, there are a lot of people who I can hardly blame for being a little surprised, I mean, by what happened, and maybe even downplaying the potential impact of his candidacy, because historically you had the situation where people at that level didn't really make it. I mean, it was just kind of like one of those things. And gradually, though, there were people like you who started asking questions, started covering it, doing this and this and this, but there were still people who ultimately were in total denial, and they tried to skew the news in that direction, maybe even the polls in that direction. You know, we talked about something kind of interesting regarding the polls even before the election, because we couldn't figure out, if you look at all the people at the rallies, and then all the people calling this show who are union guys and people who have never voted before, they're 50 years old, or people who voted for Obama in 2008 and didn't vote in 2012. And I was thinking to myself, are these people being polled? And then we went on to the idea that when your phone rings, do you answer the phone when the number isn't recognizable? And most people said no.
And listen, I've been sitting there watching TV at night, and somebody calls and says, "I'm calling from the so-and-so polling center," and the next sound you hear is click as I put down the phone. The last thing I want to do is be bothered, particularly when occasionally, I'll say, "Well, how long is this going to take?" And they'll say, 15 minutes, and I go, "Forget it." I'm busy doing it. No, you're certainly right, but here's the key, and I think this separates some people in my business, the journalism business, from others. You got to keep an open mind. You got to be very sensitive to what you don't know and what you don't understand, and what your initial instinct, maybe even from just past experience, not bias, says, well, this isn't going to happen. You've got to always keep an open mind, and I think that was the key to understanding Trump and to the phenomenon that he awakened in this country.
Now, even in the aftermath of the election, now suddenly there's yet more negative reporting, and that would be on the tumultuous transition team. And I've been hearing, and thankfully you guys are reporting this, that actually it seems that Donald Trump is pretty much, that their transition team is pretty much on schedule when it comes to transition teams.
Oh, listen. The New York Times, which I think has really covered itself in shame with its coverage of this campaign, continues now with the transition. Look, I'm sure that there are bumps in the road, but you're exactly right. One of the things that we reported last night is the fact that Barack Obama, I don't think, made his first appointment, his cabinet appointment, until 3 weeks after the election. We're now 1 week and 2 days after, and everybody's acting as if this is the Keystone Cops. So you got to wait 2 more weeks. You know, and I think Reagan didn't name anybody until 6 weeks after he'd been elected. So this is part of the other problem is that, you know, I think the people, because I have to say I'm not getting a lot of calls returned for the Trump transition from the insiders, and my guess is the people who are talking are the people who are on the outside, or the people with axes to grind. But in any case, there's been a lot of bad reporting initially about how screwed up this transition may be. It may end up being screwed up, but you can't make that conclusion yet, and probably not for at least 2 or 3 more weeks.
Do you have any more information on what's going on? It's one of those things where everybody seems to be speculating on who's going to be who, but then suddenly you have new additions to the folks who are pushing the button on the elevator, and that would be Nikki Haley and Rick Scott, which I find interesting.
Yeah, I do too, particularly Haley, because she was. I mean, she who was she for? She was for Rubio, I think, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
And then went for Cruz. I mean, it was like anybody but Trump. And I'm a big Nikki Haley fan. I think she's an enormously capable woman, as we saw in the case of the hurricane, and also I think in her immediate reaction after the terrible shooting at the church in Charleston. I think she'd be a credit to this administration. So I hope she goes in, and if she does, it'll show that, you know, this whole idea that there's so many people are so quick to jump to conclusions about Trump, and one of them is, you know, that you got to be loyal. You got to have signed on a year and a half ago as he was heading down the escalator at the Trump Tower to announce his candidacy, and if you don't, you're out. Well, she certainly would be late, and if she's named,
yeah.
One, she'd be a good appointment, and two, she'd blow that theory to smithereens. No, and let me tell you, there's something, and this is, again, an advantage of having been around the town and seen, because, you know, there were several days ago, Rudy Giuliani is going to be Secretary of State. Well, now maybe he won't. Or, you know, Kellyanne may be the Secretary of Defense. One of the things that often happens, and sometimes it's strategic and sometimes it's mischief, is people will put out names hoping to you know, sort of strategic leaks, either to try to help somebody or to try to hurt somebody. And one of the things that happened with Giuliani is that you then see some reporting, and you see that he's got some, not necessarily disqualifying, but certainly questionable or troubling ties in his business over the years to foreign governments, which raises the question, would there be a conflict of interest of him serving as Secretary of State? So, you know, there was an old saying in the Reagan White House, those who know aren't talking, those who talk don't know. And generally speaking, and I got to say, I don't have a source good enough that I would believe this person really is about to be named that. And particularly with this group, because I think that it's so dependent on Donald Trump. I mean, sometimes it's sort of a process, and by the time it gets to him, he's kind of ratifying it. That's not true with Trump. I mean, I have the distinct impression you won't. Look at what happened with the pick of the vice president. He ended up with a good choice in Mike Pence, but Lord knows it wasn't orderly or, you know, according to Government 101.
Interesting. And now I guess when it comes to the Democratic Party and they're having to figure out things in the future, it looks like there really isn't much of one. I'm trying to figure out who, I mean, other than Keith Ellison, who's really popping onto the scene as the next generation of the Democratic Party.
No, it's interesting, particularly, well, Chuck Schumer, you could say. I mean,
yeah.
He's not that young. He's in his 60s, but he's not in his 70s. I mean, you had a situation with, I'm trying to think, Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, and there was somebody else, and their average age, I'm trying to remember, was in their 70s. You know, it's, and I have to say, I think to a certain degree, that's a function of two things. One, the Clintons, and the fact that at least for the last 2, if not the last 4 years, everybody just assumed Hillary Clinton would be the nominee, which is why there really wasn't much of a fight for the nomination, except for that youngster Bernie Sanders, who's 74, and so that's one thing. And then two, Obama and his impact on the Democratic Party, which has been disastrous. He's blown out a whole generation of governors, a whole generation of members of Congress, state legislators. So an awful lot of the bench, or the developmental league of the Democratic Party, has been defeated. I think they've lost something like 900 seats during the 8 years of the Obama presidency. So you're right. There's not much of a young bench. I mean, you sit there and say, well, who are the front runners for 2020? And if Trump had lost, I could have named a half dozen people. Whether it's Rubio or Cruz or Walker or on and on and on. You'd be hard pressed to name 4 or 5 sort of big name Democrats who you would say right now, well, those are the front runners right now to be potential presidential candidates for the Democrats in 2020.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. We had some local politicians in Missouri here, and I had heard, like, Jason Kander, for instance, ran against Roy Blunt for the Senate seat, and his name was bandied about as a possible next leader even of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I saw that.
And that's interesting too, because there are some folks like even Chris Koster, who lost the governor's race here in Missouri. I mean, all those people, I don't know whether they're being talked to or what's going on, but I would imagine the Democrats could see some potential in a lot of these candidates that didn't succeed, but still have youthfulness and still possess their liberal ideas.
Yeah, and you're going to definitely defeat concentrates the mind in politics, and I think if Clinton had won these, a lot of these problems would have remained for the Democratic Party, but they probably would have been sort of papered over because they had the president. Now they don't, and it's very interesting to see what's going on in the House, where they delayed the election of House leaders, including Nancy Pelosi, who's in her mid-70s, because this fellow Tim Ryan, a congressman from Ohio, is saying, look, we can't just be the party of the coasts. I think someone was saying to me that a third of all the Democrats in the House come from California, New York, and Massachusetts. A third of the national party from 3 liberal seaboard states, and basically they're absent in the heartland. And we've seen obviously the heartland go strongly for Donald Trump. So they've got to have a message that appeals more to identity politics and left-wing politics and East and West Coast politics and voters. They've got to be able to reach out to more than that.
What do you think Hillary Clinton's future is going to be?
I think it's over. I mean, look, she's whatever you think of her, she's a strong woman, strong beliefs. I'm sure she'll be part of the public debate. And a welcome part of the debate. She's a person of real character and stature, and obviously of knowledge. But in terms of political office, I mean, none. I mean, she's done. Because look, as we said throughout this election, she was the only person he could possibly beat, and he was the only person that she could possibly beat, and she didn't beat him. So I don't see, and also, look, she's 69 years old. I don't think you're going to see her run for office again.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I thought her appearance yesterday, I was wondering, some of us are kind of hoping that she or President Obama would say something about some of these stories that are being kept local, but I believe are of national import, of Trump supporters kids being beaten up and attacked. One just recently in Maryland, in Rockville. And, man, it's terrible. And you would think that somebody would come forward and say, hey, this is wrong.
Listen, we had Kellyanne Conway on the show last Sunday, and she was talking about all the rallies, and I think it was the day before or 2 days before they'd had the violence in Portland. And she said, imagine if it had been reversed and Clinton had won a close election and the Trump people were out in the street. He said newspapers and television reporters' heads would have been exploding about how outrageous this was, and they hadn't accepted the results of the election, and would have been blaming Trump. Well, interestingly enough, now you have the anti-Trump rallies, and they're also blaming Trump, And as you say, there's no pressure at all on Clinton or Obama to reach out and say, knock it off. This is the way our system works, and you may not like the results. I mean, the president has generally behaved well, but I think he could have been tougher on the protesters than he has been.
I totally agree, and it's not beyond the realm of comprehension. He would say that even if he is overseas. All right. Well, Chris Wallace, we'll be tuning in.
Well,
what do you have?
Tell you who we got on
the
show?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we got. I want to do a little plugola here. So we're going to have Reince Priebus, This is one of the names we know is going to be in the Trump White House, the new White House chief of staff. And talking about the Democrats, we're going to have the man who thought he was going to be the Senate Majority Leader, but now he's the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer. And we'll talk to him about the future of the Democratic Party. And, it's interesting because he and Trump, because obviously he was Trump's senator in New York, have quite a relationship. And, in fact, Trump had contributed lots of money to him over the years.
Yeah.
His campaign's be interesting to see whether Schumer is going to try to find some areas to work with the new president.
I remember at that dinner, he specifically called out Chuck Schumer. He said, "Hey, where's Chuck Schumer?" Donald Trump did, at the dinner.
Yeah, what the Al Smith dinner?
Al Smith dinner, right? Yeah, it was interesting. Well, good. That'll be interesting, and I'm loving this time. It's a very interesting time, and I love the fact that we actually don't know what's going to be happening. So every day is new,
and it is. Everything always goes according to script. We're off the script now, and people ought to get used to it, and they shouldn't be uncomfortable. And let's just see how Trump did it, because his way. There seems to be method in what sometimes passes for madness with him.
Well, we love it. And we love Fox News Sunday and Chris Wallace. So we'll be there, buddy.
Thank you, Jamie.
All right. Thank you. At Fox News Sunday.